Another person that I was talking to and paying attention to at that time was Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben used to hang out across diagonally from the bookstore on 125th Street by the Teresa Hotel. And there was a place there called Chuck Full of Nuts, Chuck Full of Nuts. And he would be there all the time, either sitting inside the little cafeteria there or leaning up against cars writing his books. And he was not very popular in those days. He belonged to African-minded group. I had attended a few of their meetings and things of that sort. And they would talk about Africa and African history and things. And that's how we became friendly. And that was how I was able to interview him when they had the disturbance in 1964 in Harlem. The other person that I spent an awful lot of time with was the Frederick Douglass bookstore. Mr. Moore was very nice to me. He and his family was very nice to me. And they had things every Sunday. They had really taken their charge very seriously. They were about bringing out what had been left out of the African history, out of the books about Africa. And they also were doing some writing of their own. And one of the books that they kind of re-edited was the one by Frederick Douglass, My Life, My Bondage. And they came out with a book about Frederick Douglass. It has a red cover on it. I thought it was very profound. And I think in my collection I have cutouts of My Life, My Bondage, where they edit and was putting their book together. And I think that's, I always thought that was kind of cool. And I knew how that book was put together, and it was just interesting. And to watch these people, ladies and gentlemen, doing all of these things. Most of them did not hold advanced degrees, but they were workers. They were people that were really working towards something and to bring awareness to our people. And between that and knowing musicians, it was a very exciting place for me to be because there was a band room near there, and like say if Ray Charles was coming to town, he would be practicing in that band room. And I knew a couple of people in the band very well. One of them was John Hunt, the trumpet player from Tennessee. I knew him very well. And I also knew Margie Hendricks. And we would go out and eat or things of that sort when they would come to town. So therefore that kept me kind of busy and interested in Harlem. Now I must say, I did all of these things as I got to be a young adult. I was going to school and I was working, but my weekends were really spent in Harlem. And that was my life. That was my life. And it's just interesting how today all of that history is so interesting to more people, and for those of us whom lived through it. And I think it's important because when I first started hanging out in Harlem and really knew and going to the store, that was how I met people like Ray Robinson and people from Africa, because they all would come to the bookstore. And you would see them. For some reason, that bookstore was like a magnet. And you had Miss Ruth Miss Brown. And she was from Kansas. She was a college graduate. She always wore African traditional clothes, and she was always putting us young people together. If someone would come in from Africa that was a young person and she thought we should know them, she exchanged numbers and would give them to us and get us together some kind of way. And Miss Brown lived to be over 100 years old and was still active. And she lived in the building next door to Abyssinia Baptist Church. If I'm not mistaken, Abyssinia still owned that building, or owned it at that time. And when I wanted to see Miss Brown after the stores were closed, I knew if I went by at a certain time, she would be on duty in the lobby of the building, and we would talk about different times and different people in different places. And since there were always programs, see, Mr. Mashaw rented out material, like his microphone, his stage, and everything. So when Malcolm was going to give a big speech, or any other person was going to give a big speech, that's where they would do it, because they would rent the space and the equipment from him. And for intellectual things, I would go to Mr. Moore's place, because he would have all kinds of people there, and I learned so many things by listening to those lectures on Sunday. And at one point there was another young brother there, and he would let us talk about different things for a few minutes. And that's how we got our training, of being around these elders and listening to them. And afterwards, a little later, when I guess I became part of the family, I used to do an awful lot of recording of Dr. Clark, Mr. Moore, John G. Jackson. I have all of them on audio tape, because I would do the taping on Sunday for them. And it was just interesting living that kind of life, and it shaped me. And with my training at home, it made me try to be a better person. It made me into a person that wanted to do more for our own people. And it stopped me from looking at how much money you make. Because when I was a young person, I wanted to earn money. And that was what my job was. My job was, I worked on equipment for the government. They paid very well. I was able to take care of my family very well. However, it ended up that I got into something that I never thought I would do. I never thought I would become a teacher. And then by becoming a teacher, that was strictly by accident. A friend of mine, Lenny McCree from England, had to go back to England, and we worked in the same lab, and he asked me to take his class. So I said, okay. So I took his class, and the supervisor, because these were evening classes for the Board of Ed, says to me, you know, you would make a good teacher. And that's how I first got involved with teaching in the system. I went back to school, got the credentials I needed, and I knew that Mr. Mashaw, I knew that Mr. Richard B. Moore and others, Keith Beard, all of them, expected me to get a terminal degree. So I returned to school to do that, because I felt I owed it to them. And they had given me so much literature that I had no excuse not to do it. And I feel that the spirits have been good to me. I have been blessed. It's not too many people that can stay around as long as I have been around and face some of the things I have faced in life and still feel that I was a very fortunate person. And I remember talking to my mother when I was 32 years old. My mother was in the kitchen with her apron on, standing at the sink. And I says, Mom, I earn far less money, yet I save more money, and I'm happier. And she just turned around and looked at me and she says, you know why, son? Because you're getting yourself together. And I never forgot that. And that has always been an inspiration to me. And because Mom was nice. Mom could sing, she could play the piano. She always wanted us to better ourselves. And it was many mothers like my mom. And that's how some of us kind of got through this society, because this society, whether people recognize it or not, this society is very cruel to people of color. And it's a shame that our grandparents had to tell us that we had to be better than a white person. Children should not be put under that kind of strain, because everyone is not able to become themselves under that kind of strain. And some start doing things they shouldn't be doing. They start drinking or taking drugs. And I'm saying this from experience because I have watched it. And I have known people that were my age got involved in something like that, and they did not live to be 30 years old. And they came from beautiful families. These were not bad people. I can't say that they were, not taken care of. You can't say that. I'm speaking of people that came from homes. Their family owned their homes and all of that. And I just witnessed so many things. I've seen top musicians go down the drain. And it's something that kind of stick with you. And it also tells you an awful lot about this system and how you are meant to be a beast of burden. And it's going to take a lot to change that. And I'm not sure whether it can be changed, because it's so ingrained in this society. And even at top levels in the educational system. I have been teaching now for so many years at the university level. And people would be surprised at what still happened to you at that level, or how you are responded to. And a couple of the incidents I can remember, like you will say something to them like, well, I don't think that you should do such and such because that's going to stop your recruitment for getting your basketball players. And they think you don't know what you're talking about or referring to. That tells me that they don't understand anything about our lives, how we feel about things, or any of that. And had we had more input, I think we would have made some kind of dent in making this a better place.